Hey, what's going on, everyone? I can see we have some people in the chat already. What's up? Hello, guys. It's me, Mario. No, I'm sorry. I'm not Mario. I'm Rodolfo. And welcome back to another The Proper Way. I know. I'm funny. I'm hilarious. So, welcome back. So, in this stream, as you guys probably know, we're going to do props. It's basically focused on props. And usually I have a hard time coming up with stuff that we can, you know, hello, that one 3D artist. You're the one. You're the one, man. The one 3D artist. So don't dodge bullets too much. So I always have a hard time coming up with what we're going to do. And I thought, because since that is a small little project that I've been doing on the side, that I was going to show you my workflow for creating a cannon. And I mean a gorgeous, at least I think, it's very gorgeous, I don't know, elaborate cannon. And I mean old cannons, you know, like they used to have those at forts and stuff. So let me switch here to my ZBrush. Let me just work that camera a little bit. There we go, much better, like that, so you can see my ugly mug. Can you guys hear me okay? Is the audio good? Like, can you guys hear the music, or is the music too loud? Like, just let me know. Is the music too loud? I don't know, my ZBrush project's still loading. Let me see. That one 3D artist has been busy for 3 decades. Yep. You guys can hear the music, right? And my voice together. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. I mean, the music is there mostly for me because I hate silence, as you probably know. My little ADHD does not cannot stand the silence. So let me show you what I have been working on a little bit here for Maxon. This is the low poly version, but what I wanted to show you is a little bit of my process on how I come up with can you see my face still? There you go. On these little props that I do. You can see we have a little bit of poly paint here, but it's mostly a cannon like this, right? And this has a lot of stuff going on. No music. That is strange. No music. It's weird. There should be music. We see the properties here. Device road. Oh, okay. It was just too quiet, right? Okay, maybe I'll just push it up a little bit if you guys want. If you guys don't want the music, it's fine. It's mostly just for me anyway. There we go. Okay, as long as you can hear my voice, I think it's fine. So yeah, what I've been doing is a little bit of a prop that I've done before, actually many times, like cannons and stuff, like for an ornamental kind of designs, you know. And to me, this is a good opportunity to catch up on a few techniques, including VDM brushes and how to create your own VDM brushes for ornaments, right? And a little bit of like some IMM. You can see that chain over there. It's actually that basically, and it has UVs, so you can actually texture that. And I have started texturing this actually, and I can show you here real quick in Substance Painter. It's just, I just started, right? So basically what I did is just assign a couple of smart materials. The wood is actually made a little bit from scratch, parts of it, right? But I'm going to retexture this from scratch. It's just for me to see what it looks like in the engine, right? This is a game ready asset already. And then you can see like the chains are all white, but that's basically because it's using a separate texture, which I'm going to be, it's this one, which I'm going to be making it actually 256 by 256, right? Because it's that one texture set just for a couple of the chain rings, right? So there's no need to have like a 4K in the engine. It's just more texture memory being used up. But everything else fits in 4K. And I was thinking also covering a little bit of the RGBA masking, texturing kind of workflow, which, you know, it's very, very common in the industry, especially if you're doing like big assets, right? So yeah, so let's start by figuring out exactly what we wanna start sculpting. So first of all, let me just pull up my little reference board here. There we go. There we go. And open the Canon. Where's the Canon? Oh Jesus, it's not here. Great. This is great. Let me see. Let's see. There we go. There it is. So I have a few reference images over here, as you guys can see, right? My little pure ref scene. And I'm going to make that transparent so you guys can see clearly. And I was looking at a few of these. I'm not copying it one-to-one. There's obviously a few influences here and there, like you can see like that. There's no chain around. Like the chain is not really realistic in the sense that it's not functional. It's more there just to showcase how to use different texture sets, right? And have some ornaments on the Canon without losing resolution, that kind of stuff, right? And trying to figure out the mechanics that go into something like this. Is a 3D object, obviously, but it's more like about how it actually functions and works. And you can see there's a rope that connects the one ring here, which I completely forgot to include here, that should support the Canon, so when it fires, it just doesn't just fly off, you know. Yes, I did. I did UV unwrap in ZBrush, and then I did all my packing and stuff like that in Cinema 4D using some, you know, to set the textile density and pack it together in the same 0-to-1 space, right? So obviously, when it comes to like UVing, you need to use, well, you can use ZBrush like I do, especially for like a first pass where you just want to preview how it looks in the engine. But for the like production level UV mapping, you obviously, like, this is a hard surface object, so you need, you know, straighten shells and have all the shells like really straighten. Try to occupy at least like 80% of your UV space, you know. And there's ways you can tell like the percentage of the UV space that's being, you know, occupied. Otherwise, it's like wasting 4K textures in memory for nothing, for dead pixels, right? So yeah. All right, so first and foremost, going to cover a little bit of some, which is shared amongst hard surface techniques, and later on in future streams, I might cover like dedicated like hard surface props. But in this case, like, I'm just going to start by sketching out this base, which is usually how I start. And then we're going to go over everything else, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just create a new project just so you guys can follow along, sort of, if you want to. And I have a brush that I created for the VDMs, by the way, that I'm going to show you how to do that. So first things first is I want to have some sort of image in ZBrush, right? I could use PureRef on top of it, right? But in my case, I want to be actually using, and let me just open up an actual image that I have here. If I have a side view of that, do I have a side view of that? Let me see. Oh, Canon. Let me open file location. There we go. And this is the revolver. Nope, I don't have a side view, which is interesting. Okay, let's just get one real quick. Again, I usually use PureRef for big environments. It's mostly Miro, because it allows you to, you know, it has a lot of extra tools that PureRef doesn't have. And then I use Spotlight, which is what you should be using because it's much more practical, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that, right? As soon as my browser starts working. I mean, I'm streaming, so grab the model. Thank you. I forgot to ask you, did you do, if you did a retopo? Yeah, I did. I did every single thing you see on the model that you see in Substance, with the exception of UV packing of the multiple subtools, right, was done in ZBrush. Retopology, UVs included, right? Color IDs, like the clown masking, right? That kind of stuff was all ZBrush. Give me a second. This is taking forever to open. I don't know why. What's going on? I just hope the music doesn't the stream doesn't die because of this. That is interesting. Well, I guess we won't be doing any of that. Let's just start with a cylinder, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my gizmo primitives, right? And I usually start with like either something that's perfectly round is perfect, because then you get a gauge of like the thickness as well from whatever image you bring in. And you have two ways to bring in reference in ZBrush, right? You have the spotlight way, which is what I usually do for small props. This is not small, but you know, if you're not like super precise and you're still like experimenting with it, then I would say just use spotlight. But if you're precise, if you want to be like super precise, like with a very specific mechanical design or something, then you want to maybe go over and use the reference, right? The draw on the grid. So I'm going to show you both. I actually found a nice asset here, a nice image. Let me just import that into ZBrush. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually bring that into as a texture. So you go to texture palette, right? And on your texture palette, I'm going to go here to import. And I'm going to import that directly because I'm lazy, and so I just put it on my desktop. And this is the image that you get, right? It's something like that. It's the front view, it's the top view and the side view of, I don't know, some generic illustration I found on Pinterest. It's probably, I don't know, AI crap, but, you know, whatever. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to show you first the orthographic way of bringing in reference. You have more, actually. I have actually a ton of them here on my Pinterest board, because sometimes I'm just scrolling on Pinterest, right, and just clicking on a bunch of references, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool, and then I forget to put it on my actual reference board. So yeah, let me just download this one as well, so I have some sort of extra detailed reference of the mechanics of it, which is really cool. I love this geeky stuff. So, all right. So first things first, I'm going to bring in my draw palette over here to the side, just so you guys can see what I'm doing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my grid, my floor grid, as basically an image plane, right? So first thing is you want to go over here under this floor grid settings sub palette, right, in the draw palette. And there's, as you can see, the front to back, up, down, and left and right, like docking menus, kind of like, you know, sub palettes, as you might call it. And then you can actually import a map here, and it's usually going to feed it off from your textures, right? So that's why I imported it first here under the texture palette. So if I have an up and down image, which I do have in this case, I'm going to bring in this image. And now if I look at it, there's my image plane. And this is cool because what you can actually do, let me just use dynamic subdivision so it's not this ugly, and I'm going to restore my custom UI and bring that back again, just so I can use my hotkeys over here in my custom submenus. So I'm going to bring in that, I'm going to crease that, and I'm going to go and do a little bit of some smooth subdivisions just so you guys can see what I mean. And over here on our front and back sub palette, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead over here and change this fill mode. And you can see basically our fill mode, if you hold control, is going to tell you fill mode 1 keeps the reference images at 25% opacity. This is useful if you're doing a lot of like stuff, you know, multiple objects, and you don't want that one object's blueprints covering up everything. So, but what I like to do is I go to fill mode 3, and fill mode 3, as you can see, unlocked a couple of these sliders. And you can see now that our mesh is actually kind of like semi-transparent, right? So now what I need to do is I want to rotate this image first, because this is not, you know, it's not you know, correctly aligned, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to, not elevation, sorry, this is going to be at 0. And I can project this on a mesh, first of all, right? This is interesting. And then, oops, a daisy. I need to have that in. This is the front and back. I'm in the wrong one. I'm in up and down. So you can see we have both here, right? So on the up and down, now that we have an image, we have the scale, which means we can scale that image, right? And I don't want to scale it too much because it is the same image, so it's matching the proportions, right? If this blueprint was drawn correctly in 2D, which means everything matches, right? Then I can use the same image as long as there's the same model together to make my reference sheet. So I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna turn this. I'm gonna change this angle to be 90 degrees, right? So I'm gonna 90 degrees. And then I can do a vertical offset and a horizontal offset, which means I'm just moving the image back and forth, right? So I'm gonna go here, and you can see the fill mode now opened up the enhance factor, which means I can make this, like, as long as the model is in between that and the image, it's just gonna show me the silhouette if I push this enhance factor all the way up. And then you have the opacity of that enhance factor. I can make it like it's just the silhouette, as you can see that on that cylinder over there. If I just push this up, you only see like the silhouette, like the line of the silhouette, right? Which could be useful if you're just focused on the contour of things, which is sort of what we're doing. And now over here, what I want to do is I want to offset this, right? And you also have some modifiers here. So I'm going to offset this, actually not horizontally, but vertically, right? So I'm going to do this until it's like sort of in the middle. Sort of like that. So maybe 0.4, like an even value, right? And now on this side, actually, I don't want this to be front and back. So I'm going to turn this off. And I'm going to do the left and right. And I'm going to bring in the same image, right? So now I have this cylinder, right? And I don't want this Z, right? This Z plane over here, my floor grid. Remember, we're still using the floor grid. So now on my left and right, I want to make sure that I offset this vertically, so it kind of matches, you know, that silhouette. And you can see it in matches. Like if I do this at actually that fill mode should be like something like that, right? And you can see it kind of matches that grid. It matches the images, right? So now I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna go fill mode 3. I'm gonna push this to the front. And what I need to do is I'm gonna start with some sort of blockout shape. So I usually go with some of these gizmo primitives. So I'm gonna use my Polycube 3D. And I'm gonna bring that over here. And I can just, instead of using dynamic subdivision, I'm gonna actually sort of divide it with the crease button. So I'm gonna divide this a bunch of times until you get to like 1 million. This is the way to go if you're doing high poly blockouts, right? So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make sure that this side piece, it just covers everything, right? So something like that, something like that. There we go. And then I'm just gonna use the clip curve brush. Been there, references are 2. Hello, Margarita. That's my girlfriend in the chat, by the way. You be nice to her. You be nice to her. So, you BR. No, I'm not BR. I'm PT. Eu sou português. So, yeah, okay. So next step on blocking out using this reference images. Let me just do that. Clear that canvas. I know I'm getting this rendering issue here. I don't know why. Whatever. It's probably because I have so much stuff happening in the background, and I'm streaming. So let's see. Okay, so this is the base, and I'm looking at this image going like, okay, this works, and I don't care about this top part of that image, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm just gonna care for this, right? Now the other thing I can do is I'm gonna enhance this by 1, so making sure there's a rendering issue here, and it's probably something to do with my GPU. Let me check the turn, like maybe just shut down Substance Painter. That could help. There we go. Okay, but if I clear my canvas, it does work. Well, Shift P. No, it's still there. That is very strange. Control N, Shift P. Yeah, it's giving me an issue. Doesn't matter. So the next thing I can do is I could just project this on a mesh. And now what you can see is that I have the image projected on a mesh, and I have it both for the up and down and the side view. So the moment I transition like this, I get the understanding of what I'm actually modeling. So the first things first, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the side view like this, and I'm gonna start clipping away, right? So I'm gonna use my clip curve brush, and I'm gonna delete the lower subdivision levels, and I'm gonna pick that resolution from that cube. So if you look at the polyframe, you can see this is our subdivision mesh, and I want to make sure that I keep that detail. So I'm going to drag that resolution slider from Dynamesh and pick that resolution over there, and then I just reDynamesh. And now I have that same resolution, but it's Dynamesh. Now, first thing is I want to go back to my reference, and I want to start just by chopping away certain pieces over here. And one of the things that I can start doing is actually go over here, hold Control, Shift, and Spacebar. And we have a few options here, which is, and then you can just turn on this polygroup button. And if you do this now, the section that you clipped is going to have a separate polygroup, right? This is going to be useful if you then want to, if you plan on Z-remeshing this particularly. So now we have this ability, which we can just start chopping away few pieces like that, and like that. So this is method number one, right? And I wanted to show you guys how you can start blocking out shapes really quick, right? reDynamesh again. And I don't want to lose my polygroups. I don't think it did lose it. Yeah, it didn't. So I just want to make sure that they're there so I can then sharpen it up, right? And use that as a stepping stone towards having a clean mesh at the end, right? So this is number one. And then number two, method number two, and let me just do that with a separate tool over here. So I'm gonna make this Polymesh 3D. And what I wanna do is I wanna bring that texture as a spotlight projection texture, basically. So I'm gonna go into my texture palette, and I'm gonna actually, I need to make this Polymesh 3D, come on, there we go. And then I'm gonna click that image, and I'm gonna add it to Spotlight. Now with Spotlight on, I can just scale this up, right? I don't know if you guys can hear me, my microphone is all the way over there. So I can scale this up, I'm gonna change this opacity back to maximum, right? And I don't care about this top section, so which means that I can go over here, and I can actually start collapsing this by using an extender. So this is an extender, kind of like you have with your gizmo. And I'm just gonna start basically reverse extending this until we get nothing. So something like that. It would be something like this. There we go. So until we only have this side view. I'm gonna do that over there. Whoops. Oh, this is Control. That is mirror. Sorry. So it'd be like over here, maybe. I'm being a little precious with this, but guess it doesn't really matter. So the second thing I want to do is I want to go and Shift Z in order to control this, or I can just press Z, and I'm no longer in Spotlight mode, but I'm not controlling Spotlight. So this is a way to have reference on your screen at all times, and I can always just go back here and change that opacity. So select that image, and then go over here and select that opacity and just do that, and then click Z, and now I have basically my pure ref, because I can add as many images as I want to this one, right? So I would have a whole board, right? And I could put this wherever I want on my screen. I can put it over here on the corner, and I'll have that at all times. I can kill the cam view, for example, that little gizmo there, and I could just put it over there, or I can even put it over there regardless and just have that with a maximum opacity. But what I want to show you here is something a little different. What I want to do is I want to tap that intensity button, right? That paint button. And then I want to switch. Whoops. And then I want to switch to my paintbrush. And what I can do is I can, whoops, a daisy. I need to go paint. There we go. And then what I want to do is I want to have a black color. and I can start painting out sections of that image. Because ZBrush interprets pure black as transparent, so 0 value, right? And it is looking at as this as sort of like a transparency channel. So what I want to do is I want to actually hold control and click and drag, and it's going to do like a fill, right? It's kind of like in Photoshop when you click fill, right? And you have a fill tool, and then just fill the entire thing. So the better the resolution of your image, the better result you're going to get. But to be honest, I don't really care because this is just reference. So I can just paint out a few of these sections over here, and I'm going to be fine. So I'm going to paint out the name of the artist, sorry, or Richard. Follow that guy, I don't know. I just found this random image. And I can hold control on this again, or I could just do that, right? And the thing I want to emphasize here is that what you can do now is you could project this already as a 3D model and have this as reference. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to save out my camera position. And to do that, I'm going to go to Draw. And I'm going to go to this camera settings, and I'm going to store a camera over here. And you need to have perspective on, meaning that I'm going to be turning it on and off all the time. So I have perspective on, and then I have a hotkey assigned to this little arrow. So it's basically cycling through your cameras, right? So I'm going to store that cam view, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to call it camera, whatever. And then I'm going to scale this up. And then if I accidentally rotate my camera or move my object over here, I can just press 1 and it's going to snap it back, right? Whoops. It's not 1, sorry. It's Shift 1. There we go. Shift 1. Oh, is it not assigned a hotkey for that? Let me see if I have that hotkey assigned. No, it's Control 1. Of course. Shift 1 is repeat relative. All right, so Control 1 would go to that. This is a custom hotkey, right, by the way, that I assigned. So if I accidentally move the object, it's Control 1. And then it goes back, and then I just click P to turn off my perspective, right? And now that I have this, I'm going to go to my spotlight, and I'm going to press and hold this Snapshot 3D button. And now what I have is effectively a 3D representation of that model, right? And you can see there's some roundness happening on that image, right? Number one, the image is not that high resolution, right? And basically what you'd need to do is actually tweak that. But I mean, it doesn't really matter for us because what we care about is actually just getting something there. So I'm going to go and press my perspective off, and I'm going to go with my paintbrush. And my paintbrush has spotlight projection. If you go to your brush, in your paintbrush, if you go to samples, this little thing, if it's turned on, it's projecting whatever's on spotlight onto that mesh. Meaning that I can project effectively the color information onto that mesh. So I'm going to do that real quick. So I'm going to do this. And now if I turn off spotlight, I have a 3D representation of that to use as reference, right? So I have an actual 3D representation, right? Which is much easier maybe to control than having, you know, all these images from PureRef all the time. You just have this and you have spotlight, which means you can basically just, you can just move it around and have your images wherever you want, right? So I'm gonna go and do that. Just make sure that it's aligned. There we go. And again, if you for some reason rotated your object, Control 1, and you're back checking 1-to-1 your reference, right? Cool. Any questions about that? That is wizardry. No, it's not. It's not. This is a Wingardium Leviosa level of spell making. Yeah. Well, thank you. All right. So next step for me, if I'm using this method, is to actually start chopping off parts that I'm not interested in. Remember, this is still like just pretty much a blockout, right? It doesn't matter what I'm doing. So if I do this, for example, and chop up a section, turning off perspective actually before I do that, and then I'm gonna just chop up a little piece over here. Maybe this goes over here, and then this is straight. I don't need that over there. And I'm gonna go in and dynamesh that. Oops, I have to turn it on, obviously. And you can see preserved the color, that dynamesh, like the poly paint, right? And if you want to get rid of that, I can just go ahead and turn on my Sculptors Pro, which is under Stroke, Sculptors Pro over there. And I can just get rid of that just by smoothing out that surface. There we go. And we have this. And now I'm going to clip that so it stays within the realm of that reference. I'm going to do the same here. And I'm going to do the same here. And then here. And you can see we're starting to chop up a little bit more than what we need for our image. But I mean, it's kind of like, it's not super precise, but then you can just go back to your camera with your spotlight. So it can just go press Z and then Control 1 and basically match that. So I'm going to go and change this opacity maybe. Just, you know, just cross-reference that to see if it kind of matches, sort of. It kind of does. There we go. Just do that. And now what I have is the ability to check. So you can see we have a lot of polygroups actually, which is not ideal. So what we can do is we can go over here, press that polygroup, Control Shift X to expand, right? Or we can just do this and do a clip on the side. So something like this would be ideal. So now we have a different polygroup on the side over here. Something like that. And then something like this. And then I can just Control tap that and run a auto groups, going to my polygroups, auto groups. And now I can just go and select which polygroups I want. So I want to expand this, Control tap this one that I don't need, Control Shift Q, deselect those. And I want this to be one polygroup. And maybe this could be just, you know, cleaned up a little bit. There we go. Same thing goes for these two, Control W, or actually these two should be like that. And this is a single polygroup. I can actually just go ahead and do something a little crazy like that, right? And then the same thing goes over here, and then I could just move that right after the fact. So if we have something like this, right, and I'm gonna chop that one up as well. And this is too low res for what I want to do. So I'm gonna remesh this, redynamesh this actually. Maybe that was a lot, or that was too much. There we go. Retain the poly paint still. So we have 5 million. That's too much. That's probably too much. I'm gonna actually I don't need Sculptors Pro anymore. So I'm just gonna do a little smoothing over there. There we go. 1.8. It's much better for a piece like this. And now that we have, actually I lost the polygroups, which is very interesting. Go like this. And I want to make sure this is like that. I'm losing my polygroups. Well, that's fine. It's fine. Doesn't matter. So we have this, right? And now the second step would be, okay, let me go and Control, and actually could Shift Z, Control 1. And now I need the wheels, right? And I know this is round, so it's, you know, kind of like a perfect circle. But in this case, this is where the limitation starts to come in, right? Because you now have the wheels, and then you'd need something like a top view or something. Yeah. So what you're talking about, like the question is, could you also project your top-down image onto that first one to have a more accurate starting shape? Yeah, you could do that. But at that point, if you're projecting two images, then why not just use shadow box, right? The shadow box, you can just bring in an image and just paint a mask on the side, on the top, on the back, and it just generates a mesh for you, right? So in my case, because I do like to start clean, low poly kind of like, you know, kind of workflows. And this is in the wrong orientation. Let me just go like this and flip this around and mess up my reference. But I guess we can just match this sort of. There we go. All right. And now what we need to do is go over here to our draw. And I'm gonna delete the camera and I'm gonna store it again. Yeah. P. Again. Draw. Store. There we go. And now that control 1. And it matches the orientation. So now for the second one, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just duplicate this by holding control, right? And then moving this to where the wheel sort of is. And then I'm going to switch this to a cylinder 3D. Turn off my perspective. And I want to make sure that this kind of matches that, you know, that circumference. And then sort of something like that, right? And now I have that image. That image, actually not the image, but the wheel kind of matches. And I'm going to split that, right? So if you can see, it's masked everything else. So I'm going to go Shift D and I'm going to split unmasked. So now it's a separate subtool. And in my subtool, I'm going to turn off the visibility on that. And I'm going to go to my dynamic subdivision. And I'm going to turn on dynamic. And I want to go to crease. And I want to crease by angle. And I want to crease by like 4. And smooth subdivisions are like 6, right? Now this is cool because now I like ZModeler, right? So I like to start blocking out ZModeler as well. So this is something else. And I also like array mesh, which means that I can start blocking out. I usually start, this is at an angle in the actual Canon, and you can see in the reference, right? But I usually like to start straight because it's easier to snap the camera onto, right? But you could just say, okay, let's start at an angle. So let's say the reference says it's something like this, right? And you're like, okay, but now I can't slice this precisely, right, from this view because I'm gonna have to guess. You don't, because what you can do is you can hold control and tap, and now your gizmo is snapping to that surface. And not only that, it is actually snapping to wherever point you're pointing towards. So if I want the gizmo to be here and then snap it to this point, for example, now I know that that gizmo is facing the normal, right? So now what I can do is I can hold shift and tap that little arrow, and now my camera is facing that, right? And now what I can do is hold shift and then tap and let go of shift. And I can just tilt it like that. And now even though the model is at an angle, my camera is facing directly at that object. And now I can store a camera, right? Again. So this is another trick. As you can see, it's at an angle. If I just move this around, it's at an angle. But if I hold shift and then tap that arrow, now my camera is facing directly at the object, right? There's a little bit more wizardry for you, right? So I don't want this to be tilted because I don't like working on tilted stuff at first. And I want to start building this bottom part, right? And this is where I want to go and look at a board, right? A reference board, because I want to see if the bottom part of that is actually how it actually functions, how it stands there, right? So this is something where I would bring in those images from the draw palette, right? So I'm going to go here and I'm going to turn on my floor grid. And you can see that on my floor grid, I have that turned on, right? I have those images there. And if I turn off spotlight and turn off polyframe, they should be there. Turn off perspective. Let's see. Draw. It's not there. Oh, it is. It's projected. Sorry, I'm stupid. It's projecting on a mesh. All right, so I want to go here and I want to not project this on a mesh. So now we have something like this, right? And obviously this is now not in the correct orientation. So what I can do is I can actually orient my whole object, right? Because I don't want to mess this up. I'm going to go back to the orientation it was. So I want to go to my gizmo, turn on this pizza box stack, right? Which is your subtool multi-selector, right? So it's transpose all selected subtools, right? It's a transpose set. So if I do that, by default, it's just going to move every single subtool at once, right? I'm moving all the subtools. Imagine if you have like 80 subtools and you want to move something like an arm or something, like a mechanical arm. That's a pain in the ass if you have to move every single subtool individually. So you have this, which is an ability to move everything at once. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on my floor grid, and I'm just going to rotate this like so, right? And I'm going to move it to where I feel like that should be. So it should be like that, because then it's going to be rotated anyway. As you can see, it's kind of tilted. And now I need to move it up as well so it matches that reference. So now as I'm moving, my other camera with spotlight no longer works, right? So that's a big issue. In this case, I can just, change that that mesh. So I'm going to use this actually because it's a little bit more precise than spotlight. Spotlight, I usually use that method for like smaller props, like a revolver or something, or I don't know, some ornament or some detail on a mesh, like an ornamental shape or whatever. And you can actually come up with your patterns, right, on Spotlight. I mean, if you guys want, I can show you that, like how to make complex alphas with Spotlight, right, by using a Boolean system that we have in Spotlight. Right, so as we have this, as you can see, it's kind of like matching. This is not really, so I can just go and clip circle. Where's the clip circle? There you go. Actually, clip circle center. It just drags a circle like that. And I'm gonna try to match that over there. Whoops, it's I have to press Alt. So I'm gonna go like this, hold Alt. And there we go. So it kind of matches that. And I'm gonna go back to my clip curve, making sure that I have this properly, I can turn off my poly paint just to not confuse myself with a shape, etc. And again, as I have this, you can see it's kind of like freeform because you're using Dynamesh. And you could use the knife curve brush as well, right? But I feel like clip works fine. It's rough and it's dirty, but it works, right? So I'm gonna have that draw palette open at all times so I can just have the ability to tweak this as I see fit. And I think that is it. So let's start modeling a little bit. So I'm gonna start the blockout by maybe duplicating this one and just going maybe like 35%. Maybe not, maybe holding Alt and Shift to snap and just basically scaling on every axis except the one that you selected. So going like this, 0.5. And now what I want to do is I want to start using array mesh. So I'm going to, in my case, my hotkey for array mesh is Alt-A to turn it on. And what I want to do is I want to lock position. I want to lock the size, right? First and foremost. And then I want to offset this on the Z axis and negative. So now I'm going to go back to my reference and check where should this be? Like over there, right? And it's actually a little bigger. So I'm going to use transpose. Press Y to change the gizmo to the transpose line. And you can see where we have the pivot over there is that yellow dot. So I can just move this back to where I want. And I can go scale, and I can just scale it on every axis. Something like that. And I can move it inwards, right? I can move it like that. Actually, let me just switch that axis. Move it in. Kind of like this. Right? This is actually kind of rounded. That shape is kind of rounded. And what I can do now is I can append a new stage, and then as it is locked, as you can see in the center, and I can mirror in the X. And now I have both, you know, on both sides. Now you can see that this is not exactly in the center, at least not the reference image. The reference image is not mirrored properly, let's say. But let me see. No, it kind of is. Yeah, I think it kind of is. Because this could just be moved back like so. And I can still scale it. Like this. Scale it like that. And you can see how useful this is to have like just a silhouette. So you can check that. Something like this. And it kind of needs to match our side view as well, right? Sorta. Doesn't need to be perfect. And now for this first stage, I'm just gonna move this down a little bit. And now if I turn it off, I have a single wheel that I need to model, but it is using array to actually kind of like duplicate this. So I'm actually gonna look at this reference and I'm gonna move this up ever so slightly. And I think it does work, but it's kind of tilted. You can see it's kind of like tilting up. I mean, it's fine. It just means that the thing will be like tilting up a little bit, which is perfect for Canon, right? So we have this, and I have the same polygroup, so I'm gonna run a auto groups, polygroups auto groups. I'm gonna Alt Control Tap this one, and I can do two things. I can actually start with a sphere, or I can use ZModeler. Let's go ahead and use ZModeler, actually. So I'm going to go BZM for ZModeler, Shift D to turn off that dynamic subdivision. I'm going to solo this out, turn off my array mesh so I can just focus on this. And I'm going to hold Alt and just start painting polygroups. I'm going to paint some polygroups over here, Alt, and then drag and Shift to Shift. So I can basically borrow that polygroup and paint it over. And same thing goes here. I don't want to mess that up. So now what I want to do is actually, I want to delete that polygroup island. And then I'm going to go to this edge. And I'm going to go and close convex holes. And I'm going to choose something like, I don't know, some round corners. So if I do this, now I can drag to the left and right to change my curvature. And up and down to change the resolution. So I can do stuff like this, for example, which would give me a weird result, but I guess with dynamic on, I can have a nice preview of that. I actually want to try the circle one. So I'm going to do circle. It's just pushing that up. I'm going to do that with the wireframe off, pressing D. I'm going to do that, and then just drag that up and down till it kind of matches. There we go. And now, as you can see, it's different, and it has different polygroups. I don't want that, so I'm gonna actually, whoops, turn that off. And I wanna deselect that, Control W, and there we go. So now what I can do is I can hold Control, actually I'm gonna go like this to mask it, flip it over, and then I'm gonna hold Alt just to scale this up. Scale this down manually. Doesn't need to be perfect again. And I'm just trying to match, you know, that little dildo from the top view, you know. So I'm gonna do this like that, push it down, and there we go. And now if I do this, this is kind of like the result that I'm getting, right? So I can also do the same thing for this. I can also just go ahead with my array mesh. I can even copy this second stage. So I'm going to go press copy. And over here, turn it on, lock position, lock size, and then reset and paste. And now we have both. I can just model one and it's going to do both sides, right? Which is pretty neat. So I can move this over here, which is more akin to where it would be. And that gizmo can go over here. And now I can just do the little matching trick. So it'd be something like this, right? It's actually a pretty small Canon if you think about it. So yeah, this would be the first step, right? And I like the few of these patterns over here that I see on my pure ref. So you can see like I got inspiration from this one to get that little curvature on the bottom, right? And then with the wooden section. So I'm gonna actually still model them on the flat. And then what I can do is I can go over to the top and I can go to subtool, insert a new, I don't know, Cube 3D or something, and then just start doing the same thing over here, like that. And then I can just use symmetry, I'm sorry, and then just go over here to my clip curve brush and just start clipping like so. Like so. Actually, this needs to be dynameshed, so apologies for that. Whoops. Is this why is this masked? Huh, I have no idea. Okay, whatever. Shift P and dynamesh. All right, there we go. Actually, I need one polygroup dynamesh, and now I can just go ahead and start chopping up the pieces that I need for this, and there we go. And now we have a little bit of a mesh that kind of resembles what we have in that reference, right? Turn off perspective, move it down, thicken it up a little bit. Something like this. There we go. Doesn't need to be perfect again because we're still gonna move that thing around anyway. This could also be, like, I don't know, clipped like that, right? Something like this, and then you could just rotate it in to match that angle, sort of, right? Okay, so cool. Now, well, this is a rendering issue, so it's fine. So now, how do I basically make that little iron band going around, you know, around that model? So in order to do that, I have to ZRemesh this because this is dirty as, you know, AF. It's not really clean geometry, right? So what I can do is I can go over and try a ZRemesh real quick. So I'm going to go to geometry, ZRemesher, turn on keep groups. I'm going to smooth this by 0.1 and go like a double first. So my first iteration, adaptive size down to 0, ZRemesh. Any day. There we go. And now I want to start going it and doing it by half. Now we have a few stray polygroups, and if you get an error, it's probably because you have some sort of non-manifold. So if you check, you can see there's one face with multiple references on the same vertex. So you could just click fix mesh and it will fix it for you. Now, what we have at this point is some very, very weird geometry right over here. This is because I wasn't high enough. Like my resolution wasn't high enough. Not me. I don't get high. Okay. So let me just go ahead and dynamesh this one more time to a higher resolution and actually retain the polygroups now. That's weird. So what I can do now is I can go over to my Z plugin, go to polygroup it, and click that plugin. It's going to open up, and I hope it doesn't crash because it uses the GPU, and I'm streaming. So, okay. Let me just move this. There we go. And I want to make sure that this is nice and full screen. And now I'm using my polygroup it plugin in order to just have basically a polygroup on each side that's clean, right? And then I'm gonna just press OK, right? And you can see what's going on here. So what I can also do is I can go over here and then just go to this side, right? And I can go to polygroups. Whoops. And then just go group front. It's gonna group based on my camera. Is it group front, group visible? No, group visible is different. It's group front. So, but I need an angle to this. So I'm gonna go. Was it group? No, it was a masking thing. That's right. So I'm gonna go to masking. Mask by, where was that? Jesus, I probably used this thing. Mask by draft. There you go. So if I go mask by draft, I'm getting, I need an angle here. Draft angle of 1. Mask by draft. So I'm gonna set the direction first. That's probably it. There we go. So now I can see, you can see I have a mask here, right? And what I can do basically is just get this to be a polygroup, right? Just a little dirty, as you can see, or I can just slice it. It's, maybe that's cleaner and easier. So I'm just gonna clip this with a polygroup and then get rid of that one because that's gonna be a stray. So something like this, right? And then delete hidden, geometry modify topology, delete hidden, and whoops, click curve. There we go. There we go. And I think that's it. I'm gonna push this over here just to make sure that those are kind of compressed. Right, there we go. And I want to make sure that this is also sliced properly, or clipped. Not clipped, actually. I want to slice this. Slice curve like that. So now I have 2 separate polygroups over there, and these 2 are going to be like that, and I'm going to slice this on the bottom. Now we have nice polygroups, right? You can see over here, if I turn off the line, some polygroups for each of that. So I'm going to do the same here. Like this. Or actually, something like that. And then these two are going to be the same one. And I'm going to mirror that. So I'm going to mirror and weld with local on. There we go. And I actually want to mirror the other way. So I'm gonna go like this, and in order for it to be like super easy, I'm just gonna rotate my gizmo and use dynamic local subdivision, which is looking at the gizmo, right? So I'm gonna go mirror and weld, and there we go. We have a kind of clean geometry, sort of. All right, so now is when we are ready to go ahead and let's just fix the mesh just to be sure, and just do this. Run a ZRemesher. Do you guys have any questions about these? I know I'm going a little bit faster because, again, like all my streams, I get caught up explaining the features and then I'm like, you know, where's the model? You know what I mean? So let's see if this ZRemesh doesn't crash my my machine, because it's doing a lot of polygrouping. There we go. And it gives you a pretty good first result, actually. Because again, the slicing was clean. So there's obviously a little bit of those issues over there, which actually I could just get rid of this, to be honest. I could just do, you know, I could just mask this off and just go like this and just get rid of that, like so, right? And then I can just have that as a single polygroup. There we go. And now I can just dynamesh this again. There we go. And then I can use live booleans for that, actually, right? Should be much better. This is what I did in the other project. So now that I did this, I'm going to do it again, like the ZRemesher by half. Error. Again, giving you weird non-manifold geometry. It has 102 edges that are shared by more than 2 polygons. It's probably that area over there, right? So first and foremost, let me just save my project. All right, I'm gonna go ZB, let me just go into my own folder here, and I'm gonna ZB stream drops. And there we go. And now I want to fix the mesh. And there you go. Fix the mesh for me. ZRemesher. Just wait a little bit for it to hopefully not die on me. Let me check here with the yeah, there we go. Okay, so there's some issues here, as you can probably notice. What I need to do is I can figure out, okay, there's a hole there, so I'm going to close holes, and I'm going to make these its own polygroup. Like just an entire like an entire loop around that. What I needed to do probably was before doing that ZRemesher, I would want to clean that up. You can see that there's a bunch of polygrouping here that shouldn't be there, basically, and just clean that up a little bit. I can run a polish by features, right? I can do a little bit of a mirror here, mirror and weld, and keep that symmetry on, so ZRemesher gives me a symmetrical shape. And I can go over my deformation. Let's go deformation, polish by groups, just polish them a little bit. So it at least gives us some sort of like, let me just turn on that open circle. There we go. A little bit more. So basically what ZRemesher is also doing when you turn on that smooth groups, right? So because it wasn't high enough, let me just fix the mesh. ZRemesher. Hopefully it will be a little cleaner. And then we can just go by half. There we go. There's issues there for some reason. There's some weirdness happening over here, as you can see, right? So I'm gonna go to ZModeler, and I'm gonna start collapsing a few edges. So I'm gonna collapse that, collapse that, collapse that, collapse that one, that one, that one, and that one, and collapse that edge. Smooth that out a little bit. It doesn't need to be perfect. Again, it's just so we can aid ZRemesher a little bit, and then we can also just click retry, right? Unless we change the topology. I'm just gonna ZRemesher by half, and you can see how cleaner it is. It's much cleaner, right? Just because you did a little help, you're just helping ZRemesher, right? Come up with, you can see there's some poop over there. So I'm gonna close holes, and this is gonna be its own polygroup, like that, right? And I'm gonna ZRemesh by same. There we go. Much cleaner. And now by half, and I'll keep smoothing the groups up until a certain point. Like that, and you can see this is not grouped, which is an issue for me. Like that, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and clip curve. Whoops, no symmetry. Clip curve. There we go. And then ZRemesh by half again. I turned off symmetry. Forgot to turn it on. I'm gonna do a little bit of a stronger smooth groups. There we go. And now I'm gonna kill off the smoothing groups, and I'm just gonna keep remeshing it by half. Right? Something like this. So I get a sort of clean mesh that's quadded. and make sure that this is flat like that, right? And then ZBrush it by the same, so it gets even cleaner, right? So if you're helping ZBrush get to the best result, like you need to help it a little bit, right? Because it's not like it's gonna guess what you wanna, what result you want. So we have something like this, which still has the array mesh, and I'm gonna go dynamic again, 6, increase level by 4, and I'm gonna increase PG, increase those poly groups, and I can actually go much lower on this because it's gonna be wood anyway. And there we go. Now, since we're low poly and we have some basically some poly groups, what I can do is I can just run a UV master on this and, you know, come up with a pattern from surface noise. Now, for this top section here, all I need to do is go over here, flip that selection, and I could do this in low poly, in a high poly as well, right? Deselect that, and then I just want to make sure that I want to split hidden. Go to subtool split hidden, and then Control Z to get that back. And now I have a separate subtool over there. That's clean mesh, right? So what I need now is I can actually go with my dynamics subdivision, turn it on, turn on some thickness. The offset should be going out, maybe not 100%, maybe like 60. And I don't want that smooth subdivision. I don't need any smooth subdivisions. I can just do this. And I can do this post subdivisions or, you know, before subdivisions. And let me see, I'm gonna do a little bit of smoothness so it smooths out those edges, right? And now we have the ability, let me just do actually a couple of smooth things. I'm gonna do a little bit of that, and there we go. Right, something like this, and then I can just go in and scale it down maybe, or scale it out. So you'd have something like that, right? So you can also just inflate this a little bit. I'm just gonna inflate this ever so slightly, and now turn on that that smoothness and thickness, right? I'm gonna turn off my creasing, so uncrease all. So get a little bit of a rounded edge over there, and you can see we have a few weird poly grouping happening here. So, and you can see why this is giving me that weird topology. So what I can do now is I can go over here and ZBrush this again by the same, keeping groups and smoothing them out just a little bit. And you can see it basically gives me that. You see that rounded bottom part? There we go. That's exactly what I want, and I want this by half actually. So something like this, right? And now with thickness on, we have that, right? And let me just go ahead and tweak that thickness a little bit. Maybe add a couple of segments. Like that. And I want this offset to not be 100% like this. Okay. Now the next step for me is to actually come up with the cannon itself, which is, you know, the holy grail of the piece. So I'm gonna go like this, go to cylinder 3D, scale it up, and now I need to match not only my reference, because my reference doesn't have a cannon. So I'm gonna go like this, and I'm just gonna guess sort of like how would this work. So it'd be something like that, maybe like this, right? And I want to crease this like so, and split that. Split unmasked points, and this doesn't need any dynamics because it's dynameshed. So something like this, and then maybe in my blockout already, I can start already telling it, hey, I want a little bit of a half a sphere happening here. So I'm going to go polygroup flat island with my ZModeler brush. Just whoops, flat island actually, and let's go like that. There we go. And now this I can do now a couple of things. I can insert not polyloop, sorry. I need to go to edge, insert edge loop, multiple edge loops, and I can have interactive elevation, which means I can do this and then just do that and keep adding to this, right? But because we have a pole, right, this is not ideal. So it looks kind of weird actually. Let's go over here, turn that. Let's actually delete this. That's the best way to go about it. So deleting that and going here to bevel, not bevel, sorry, close spline, and then just do like sort of like a perfect circle like that. There we go, like increase all, increase PG, increase angle, and now increase level 4, smooth subdivisions of 6, and we have a recreation, or at least a base blockout for our shapes, right? Now, for this little beast, which is what we should be focusing on next few steps, is I want to use my deformer. So what I want to do is I want to taper this. Maybe I want to taper it like that, right? And then I can basically change that exponent, and I can also taper this out a little bit. So I can do weird curvatures like that. So it'd be something simple like this, right? Be something like this. And now, in order for me to start basically creating some details around this, now the next step would be to actually make this cannon barrel thing. And I'm going to use ZModeler for that. So I'm going to inset polygroup island, inset it like that. And I'm going to use my presets actually. So I have QMesh polygroup island. And there we go. And then I can just do that and drag it all the way back. And then just drag it a little bit more. And there we go. And now if I increase PG, we have something like this, right? Now, next step is to actually either use some curve, which I used IMM curves to create the rings around that this cannon thing. So what I can do actually is what I usually do is before I even do this hollow kind of thing, I'm going to duplicate my model, and this one I'm going to use as a base, right? So I'm going to apply those dynamic subdivisions, delete lower, Control W, and this is just going to be a base for me to start slicing, right? And I could do this in multiple ways. I can just go over here, for example, go slice curve, Control Shift spacebar, and go B radius. So now the radius of my brush is actually going to be doing a slice like that. See? So I'm going to turn off my topology because I don't need it. And I can start slicing little rings around it, right? Like that, and then like that. And then like this, maybe I want another ring over there. And this would have like your ornaments around it and whatever. And now what I can do is I can either use panel loops, I can retopology, I can do Z-remesher, I can, I don't know, make some an IMM curve brush and then just frame it around those polygroups, right? And in my case, I actually want this over here, but it's going to go around it, right? Or you could just extract this, clean it up, Z-remesh it, and then just use it as a low poly thing if you're into like, you know, low poly subdivision kind of workflow and ZModeler. Now, this is one way to go about it, right? Where you can just go over here to edge loop, go panel loops, and you have those loops over there. So I can go and maybe I want to go ahead and add some more thickness, maybe 0.05 is fine. If I add panel loops, you can see now I have a few rings, and I can just go like this. Whoops. I can go and select those rings alone. Or, and you can see how a ring is kind of like sitting around that, right? And you can see it's actually touching that surface because the actual panel, like this inner face, is the original face, right? And we didn't even need retopology. It's just giving you those panel loops, right? And it's high poly. And the fact is that if I turn on my topology, you can see it is pretty clean. It's giving me some clean geometry actually, right? From those, like that Dynameshed slice that we had before, right? So we could just go that route and we can tweak that bevel profile. But what I like to do is I actually like to, instead of having the B radius on, turn off the B radius, and I could just go ahead and do, whoops, not this one. Go slice, turn off B radius, there we go. And I can just start slicing the sections that I want those rings to be. So I want one of these here, and I want another over here, let's say, right? Actually, I want another over here, like matching that. So then this would have your, like the turning things, right? Like the supports. And now what I can do is I can just select or mask. So I'm gonna mask the ones I want. I want these three lines to be the same. So I'm gonna go and extrude profile. And for extrude profile, you can see we have some scribe lines. And I usually start with this one, or you can do a different pattern, but I just use this one. And I'm just gonna go to stroke, curve functions, and frame the polygroup border. And you can see that it's actually not taking masking into account, but that's okay. We can just go over here and then select the size. Let's go a little small, and this tap, and now you can see we have some rings going around that cannon, right? So now we can just go ahead and go masking, not masking, sorry, subtool, split unmask points, and there you have it. You have your cannon rings. Now, obviously, this one is a little too low poly for my taste, and it's probably because the curve itself is not as high poly as it should be. So I'm going to actually tap that one, because that one I don't care. And now I'm going to basically go to subtool, split unmask points, and that one, this one actually, is the one I don't care. So I'm going to delete this one. This one I care about, so I'm gonna delete as well. I want to delete this ring because I don't want that to be the same. Delete hidden, and there we go. And now we have some cool cannon rings going around our mesh, right? And this is sort of what I did, right? Now, last topic of the day, right? So if I want to make sure that I'm using this high poly version just for detailing, that kind of stuff, I want to make sure that this is actually, let me just clear that, delete those curves, and I'm going to select just these, and I'm going to frame that mesh, and now I want to select a different pattern. Let's say, I don't know, let's just do a circle, like a pure circle or something like this, where you can just tap. You have this different kind of design. So let me just increase that draw size. Whoops. And I want that curve resolution actually. So I'm gonna go to curve step, not curve step, sorry. It's under brush. I think it's under brush. Is it under brush? Let me check. Curve res. There we go. Let me just go up that resolution. No, it's not. It's the steps. Yeah, of course it's the steps. So it's steps. Let's do 4. If I tap that, oh, there you go. It's actually the opposite. Let's do the stepping, needs to be 0.1, so it's a 1/10 of that. But now it doesn't go all the way. It doesn't go all the way. So we need to actually go over here, do some steps, and go to 0.5. Oh, it just doesn't go all the way for some reason. 0.5. Let's see. Come on. There we go. That's good enough. So now we have a little bit of a different pattern. And now I can just go ahead and split. Is that a perfect circle though? I would advise you to just use your mouse here. You just click, right? So there's no moving happening. And then I'm gonna go ahead and split that. Split on mask points. And I'm gonna clear that curve because I'm a little OCD with that. And now I wanna make sure that this is looking nice and tidy. Okay, now, next step, right? So first of all, let me just clean this up a little bit here. I wanna make sure that this is a nice kind of cylindrical shape. So I'm gonna mask those. Let me check my reference and unmask that section. And I'm just gonna move those. Ah, why is this not? Oh, okay. I need to flip it over and then go to center of unmasked and go ahead and tap that. Tap. Just move it up. Actually, no. I want this to be circularized. So what I can do is, as I've done before, right? Let's just delete those. Right. Let's just delete those. Go delete hidden. Right, that's perfect. Shift D. And I want to start bridging this. So Z modeler. And I want to bridge edges. So I'm going to bridge this. And I can do the same over here, same over here, same over here. And now I'm going to go insert an edge loop, a multiple edge loop thing. Keep polygroup, and I just want to change that elevation. And I can do this with the dynamic on. So I can actually match that curvature a little bit better. So it'd be something like that. Right? It's a little weird looking. Whoops. So it should be. Something like that. Right? So now we have a little bit of that roundness. It's not perfect, but still. And now what we can do is we can start playing around with some live booleans, right? So I'm going to insert a cube there. So I'm going to go to my IMM brush IMM primitives. And on this primitives, I'm just going to select an insert cylinder and just insert one over there, right? Like right there in the middle. And I'm going to split this. Split on mask points. And I'm going to make sure that this gets big enough to match that. So it would be something like this, right? Or actually more like that. So you'd have this cylinder going in there, right? It'd be something like this, where it's just supporting the cannon. And I can also, now that we think of it, I'm gonna delete this, and I'm gonna go and move this with the pizza box. all of that and just move them sort of like that, right? Something like this. Just to make sure that it's a little higher. Yeah, something like that. And now I don't want this one to be seen. I want that one for sure. I want to have it dynamic subdivision on that. And now we want this to be our kind of like preset for that section, right? So we can actually go over here and mess around with this. Let me just scale that up like that. Make it sit over there so it's more even. And then we can just control tap that one and just move it up ever so slightly. Mask those polys, move it up, mask those. There we go. That's going to be our main kind of like, you know, shape. Insert it over there. And I'll duplicate this, and this is going to be our subtractive, and this is only going to subtract from over here. So I want to make sure that that is on. And I'm going to make sure that this dynamic subdivision is on, but without any thickness. I don't want any thickness. And I want to have a few creases. So I'm going to make sure it's creased. And if I turn on live boolean and I scale it up, we have this ability. Huh, there's a little cylinder over there, just sitting over there. That's very, very weird. Okay, I must have pressed with the IMM. So let me just go ahead and do some auto masking, auto groups, I'm sorry. And then just do that. And go delete hidden. Yeah, that should be, let's go to dynamic, turn off thickness. Crease, and there we go. Now crease level of like, I don't know, 2. And this should be actually something like that, right? Now, VDMs, right? Let's talk VDMs. So VDM brushes are basically your alpha collection brushes, like a multi-alpha brush. But your multi-alpha brush doesn't have undercuts. That means that basically a VDM, let me just go ahead and open up a new tool. Let me just actually switch this to like the Sphere 3D and just make Polymesh 3D. So if you go to your scribe brushes, not scribe, sorry, chisel brushes, this is what a VDM looks like. So it's an alpha that has that 3D. And that means if I draw this on the surface, you can see it has undercutting. Actually, let me just divide this a bunch of times. It has some undercutting. Like an alpha usually is like a displacement, right? It's up and down. But a VDM is basically going in and having like, it's a vector displacement. So it has like orientation of the normal kind of thing. So in order to create one, you actually have to start from plane 3D. And you can't really change the topology of your brush, right? But in order to do ornaments, what I usually do, this is what I did for those ornaments that you've seen in the beginning of the stream, is I went in over here to and created a plane 3D, make Polymesh 3D. And now I want to start dividing this without the smooth on, because I need to have this be on the grid. And if you did that by mistake, you can always morph it back to grid, right? So I'm going to start dividing this until I get to, I don't know, like 1,000,000. And what I did was I used the scribe chisel and used one of these chisels, right? And then I tweaked the settings over here under my brush palette, like over here in the curve, the modifiers, right? So I changed this, and then I went to the stroke, and then you have like some curve modifiers here as well, so you can tweak the intensity and the size. And I just started drawing. And then this, what this does is actually cuts in, right? And since this allows you to have undercuts, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter, because if you're doing like ornaments and stuff, you usually don't want a lot of undercuts, you know? So yeah, in order to do like holes and like arches and stuff, you're not going to use a VDM anyway. So in order to do like a whole library of things, what I did, like first and foremost, before anything else, I want to store a morph target. Right? This is important, as you'll see later. So because if I have a morph target stored and I do a stroke like this, and then I tap outside, if I do another stroke like that, and then I do that, you can see it's not going over that. It's looking at the morph target. And the moment you stored the morph target, it was a flat plane, right? So if you didn't have the morph target stored, and if you, let's just delete that morph target, and if I did this, and then tapped outside to confirm, and then I did this again with Alt on, you can see it's just going over that. And this works with scribe lining, by the way, for hard surface. If you want to start doing, I don't know, some scribe, and start scribing some patterns, like, you know, this is not the scribe, I'm sorry. The chisel brush, that's right. So if I want to use this chisel brush and I want to start cutting some panel lines, and I then go and cut like this, you can see like it's just colliding with that. But if I store a morph target and I do this and then I do that, you can see it just goes in nicely because it's only pushing the vertexes looking at the original mesh that you stored the morph target on. So you have to imagine that ZBrush, when you're doing a stroke, it's looking at this state. So it's pushing these vertices that amount of offset, right? That amount of displacement. And so this is why I usually store a morph target, right? So you can also start designing like your own kind of like, you know, floral kind of designs or whatever, you know. So you can do this, and then you can add to that. You can add that like the wrap mode. So if you want to do a tileable texture, for example, you use like in surface noise or whatever, you can go over here to create, and then curve, and then turn on that wrap mode. And if I start doing this now, this is what's happening, right? So I'm doing my own little patterns and designs, so I can go a little crazier with this and go like that. And it's still looking at that morph target, as you can see. I'm just designing patterns, infinitely looking, look at that, abstract art. It's beautiful, right? Perfect. So what I want to do in this case is I want to use my chisel brush, my scribe chisel brush. That's what I mean. It's because it's both names, it gets me confused every time. And I can use different tips. So I can do something like this design over here. Maybe have it be a little thicker and just Alt tap that curve. And you have a little design like that. And then you could just go and do that. And you're doing like your own like ornamental shapes and designs, right? Yeah. And then as you do this, give me a second. Right. And then as you do this, you can then just use that as an alpha, just drag and drop everywhere. So this is basically how I came up with this brush. I created this ornaments. This is an IMM ornaments, but I have the ornaments brush, where basically I just did, designs like this, for example, where you can just, do multiple like floral designs, kind of like this, right? Where you'd be basically, in order to do that, you can just do, okay, what I usually do is I can just go to my scribe chisel. I really have to put that in a menu or something. So if I go and do, let's say I want to delete that and I want to start doing like a floral design. So I'm going to go really thick and just do that. And then design like a spiral shape. And then Alt tap that. You can see it's a little too, whoops. There you go, that's a little too much maybe. Maybe I want this to be a little flatter shape. something like this. And what I also want is, in order for this to work, I don't want any like fat tips on the bottom there. So I can go ahead and go to stroke and go to this curve fall off, and then just do something like this. And then if I do that, no, it's not this. What was it? Was this it? Something here maybe. No, it was this. That's strange. It's a little slow. I have no idea why. So let's do stroke. Delete that curve. And I want this step to be 1 in order for me to do this. And I actually want this sub steps to be like that. So you can see like this sub steps is actually controlling that stroke. Let's go over here to curve step. There we go. Much nicer. So I can keep moving this. You can do stuff like going into itself, kind of like that, right? And I actually prefer this one. And I can go to my stroke, and under curve functions, I can smooth that curve. And I can tap it. Should have a detail kind of like this, which is kind of weird. Looks kind of like poop. So I'm gonna just delete that. And this one, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna design. Actually, let me do this like that. So something like this. Like that, right? I like that one. Now what I can do is I can make it even thicker. I can do this. You can see like it's going very thin and then super thick at the end, and then it grows thin again. So what I want to do is I want to actually delete those last points under the stroke and make sure that this is kind of like all flat over there. So now if I go like that, you can see like it ends on a thicker note. So, and now my focal shift can go back to something like this, and I can start this like that, and then Alt tap this. That still doesn't work for me. Let me do maybe just a little bit like that. There you'd have it. So imagine something like this, and then you just tap outside, and you still have that morph target, meaning that you can do inner strokes like that. And obviously now we need to sort of reset this. Focal shift down to 0. That one down, and then this one would go like that. Then we have like this little floral tip, and you can also just reduce that intensity so it's not as intense, right? Something like that. And then you can do the same thing over here, like another floral design, right? And you can do like stuff like this, right? You can also do like outwards. Just design your own floral patterns. I can just do it a little bigger like that, right? Just design those. Actually, let me just go back. It should have been like that. like that, and then like this. So you can start having, like, I don't know, you can look at patterns online and just try to, you know, basically try to make them as you see it online. Like, you know, in architecture designs and stuff like that. So you can go like this. Go like that, a little bit crazier. Go back and just do something like this. Whoops, auto saving. There we go. It's actually a pretty light project. Should be something like this, let's say. You can move those to make it a little smoother. Right? And let's say you have this design and like, okay, I need to soften up this a little bit, make more of like a tip over there, maybe a little thinner, maybe like that, right? And then maybe keep that stroke going. Actually, let's take a look at this before we even do. So it'd be something like that. And you can sculpt on top of this, not like you can't do it, right? So if you have that design, and now you're like, okay, I want to make this an alpha, right? What you want to do is you want to go to another like VDM brush, like your chisel brush, Chisel 3D. And you want to go over here and click Create Multi-Alpha Brush. And it's going to create, you can see a 3D pattern, and that's because you can have undercutting. So let's say, in this case, I want to have some undercutting. So I'm going to go Damien Standard, and I can start with a lazy mouse, just chiseling away at that, so to make it. And this is something I do go over with my sculpting brushes, like just a little bit more of that lazy radius, just go like that, just to fix that curvature a little bit. And again, remember that you still have your morph target, meaning that you can still basically morph back to, I like using the smooth directional just so I can keep that curvature kind of consistent. You can see that I'm just doing little curved strokes, and then I can just go like that, and then curve stroke with the smooth directional just to fix that a little bit. Very low intensity. And there we go. So if we have something like this, right, with some undercutting, it's not really undercutting, it's not that obvious because this is just a pattern, right? You can do this and this, so it looks like it's kind of like welding onto the surface, right? Like that. See? And now if you do that and you do Chisel 3D, you can see like we have this, and now we can just go ahead and create multi-alpha. And it's just looking at your subtools, by the way. So it's just updating that tool. And now if I drag and drop, this is what you'll see, right? It's just a pattern. And now what I can do is I can go over to my Canon, right? And on my Canon, I can go and use that high poly that I had before because it's clipping through that mesh. And I could just inflate it in just a little bit. Just inflate it ever so slightly, like -1. Don't even need 1, maybe. Oh, but it can't do less than 1. So -1. And it's barely inside that surface. And now if I drag that, if I go to my ghost, if I drag that, oh, it's not. It's actually pretty close. So I'm gonna Dynamesh this again and actually Dynamesh it to a fair resolution. Something like this. right? And if I drag this over, why is it not? Huh, it's live Boolean. Why is it Booleaning that thing? So I'm gonna go to subtool, let's see what is happening over here. Oh, it's, yeah, because it's not visible, right? So live Boolean has a hard time with that. So I can do like a mirror thing so that I can just, you know, design a pattern like that. I can go over and around a mesh because I know this is kind of like symmetrical, right? And hi, new people on the chat. So if we go over here to under my transform and I'm going to use the Z axis as a radial symmetry counter, I can do like crazy floral designs like that. See that? It just goes around. This was just with one brush, right? You can start designing that, and then you can go with your smooth directional just to blend it a little bit, right? Something like that. And then you get your designs, right? Basically, this is what it is. And then I can go, I have a few of them here in my ornament brush. And I have like this one, which is perfect. I can just go ahead and draw it in the center. I mean, just use my symmetry, but in this case, I want to X without radial, without that pattern. So I can go a little bit crazier with this, but maybe not too crazy because this is already, I need this to be a little higher in terms of resolution. So I can go maybe like that. Also, another good idea is to store a morph target before you do any of this. So I'm going to go back and I want to make sure that this is like, you know, at a fairly high resolution. I just smooth that out a little bit. There we go. We have 5 million polygons. So if that's not enough, then I don't know what is. And we want to make sure I want to draw this design. So you can see now I can even just clip through, and especially if I have a morph target. So if I go ahead and do a morph target, now we can't dynamesh, by the way. Once you store a morph target, you can change the topological order. Because then what you're doing is you want to do, let's say, a design like this, but you have a little pattern, and I want to make sure that they kind of match. So maybe something like that, right? With a little bit of double cutting. And now that I have this design, what I can do is I can go over with my previous design and start basically going, actually the other brush that I just created with you guys. So let me just go to the chisel 3D. And now I want to do that, that radial kind of pattern thing. So I want to do it maybe like 16. And I can start, and you can see it's just clipping through that. I can go a little bit crazier on this, right? And you have that kind of design on your cannon, like your, well, it's a little stretchy here, obviously for obvious reasons, but I can just go back to my ornaments brush. This is ornaments IMM with a lion that I sculpted. It's gonna go a little crazy. Look at all those lions. It's like this lion shape I sculpted. And then let me see. Oh, it's going to my ornaments, and I'm going to use that ornament. And I want to make sure that this is making sure it's right dead down the middle. That's center. Should be something like this, so it's less stretchy. And then with this or something else, I can just go ahead and do like the Z radial symmetry thing. And if we just do like a pattern like this, and then maybe, or maybe instead of that, we could just have like a floral kind of design to it. See that? Something like this. Right? With such highly detailed patterns, how can we preserve them in a lower resolution? You don't need to preserve them. It's going to be baked. So you're going to have that as a normal map. If you're doing a game asset, that's what I would do. if you want to preserve that curvature and stuff, I would just do your UVs first, project those details, subdivide it, and then decimate with keep UVs on. And then you have a very high, very dense mesh that has the original UVs and it has that elevation, right, for those patterns. It depends what your target is, I guess. If you're targeting film, then probably that would be a better way to go. But if you're targeting games, then you don't need all of that detail. It's going to be seen as kind of like blend. Again, let's see if this doesn't crash. Let me just save this, so I don't lose all my work, and then I can pull my hair off. And now I'm gonna show you a little bit of that Canon thing. There we go. So this is the same technique, same workflow, and you can see that it's grabbing that as normal maps. Obviously this is not ideal for certain details that are too like elevated, but you can see we still get a pretty nice result. This is actually not a baking artifact. This is more of a Dynamesh artifact than anything else. But you can see like all these patterns are basically those patterns that I just showed you, right? They're just, you know, spread around and sculpted. And this is in substance, obviously, but it starts here sculpturally, right? So we can do like, I don't know, like a pattern like this. Or that. Or maybe I would want to actually do this pattern or that pattern. Like that, for example, right? And then this. Like that. Should get a nice cool little pattern over there, right? And then you have to keep in mind this is a mesh that's underneath it, right? So yeah, I think we're going over time already, but I mean, I was having fun. So yeah, so this is like the basic. Obviously then for this, if you want to start previewing this, I would just go Z plugin. Like very quickly run a UV master with polygroups. Just run it, right? There's like 15 polygroups. Why is there 15? Like what? Okay, let's just clean this up a little bit. There it is. Okay, so we can just do this, and then just this could be a single other polygroup, and then just go Z plugin. Unwrap. There should be 3. There you go. That's 3 polygroups. And now that we have this, I'm gonna go and flatten this. I'm gonna look at those shells, and I'm gonna try to straighten them as much as I can. Whoops. Obviously this is not gonna be perfect. You know, this is not ideal at all, especially for, you know, a hard surface kind of look, right? This is too skewed and wonky. But what you can do is with the morph, actually, you can go over here and you can aid it a little bit. So let's unflatten this. Nope, not morph target, sorry. UV map, and I want to morph UVs. And I want to go over here. Let's try this actually. Brush, move brush. And we're going to start pushing this to be a little bit like straighter. Obviously this is not going to be perfect, right? So we can do that. We can go move topological and just go 1. It's just moving one of those. It's move topological actually, so it doesn't work. So I'm going to move that. Yeah, so we need to make this sort of work with our, it's just for preview's sake. We're going to do a final UVs after. Something like this. I don't know why this. And then if you click morph, it's going to skew those UVs, and then I'm going to add some surface noise. And we do have a noise plugin with some wooden patterns And I want to press OK, add some strength, turn down that mix, basic noise, and I want to rotate that angle. I don't know why, maybe not the Y. And the X, there we go. Should be something like this. Or you could just grab a texture, just to take a look at how it looks at the end. So it'd be something like 90 degrees. And then just grab an alpha. I'll just grab an alpha. Just really quick. From my Megascans library. Just download surface wood board. Doesn't matter though. It's just a displacement. There we go. And now I want to turn this off. I want to use my UVs. And I'm going to start changing that scale a little bit and that strength, right? And then I can mix this noise a little bit, and I can mix it like that on the minimum, and I can scale that noise actually. Can I scale that noise? No, I can't. Whatever. So yeah, this would be just like a preview of that. You know, and then I could just press this, and I don't want to mix any noise actually. Yeah, just so you get a picture of what it's gonna look like, right? Should be something like this, right? So yeah, this is a very basic blockout, and I was talking a lot. But if you guys have any questions, you guys know where to find me on socials, right? And you can ask me. I'll try to reply as fast as I can. Obviously, a little busy, Maxon, right? But yeah. Do you guys have any questions? It's already like 8:15 here, p.m. And I need to go cook some dinner. Alrighty, if there's no more questions, then I guess this is my cue to leave you guys to it. No more questions. Rare. Okay. So I'm going to send you this QR code. If you look at this, no, not this, in the start stream, you can see there's a QR code there. Right? And I can actually copy this. If you scan that QR code, you should get a page that is it's gonna bring you up to a page where you can find basically all my socials. You'll find the Discord server, you find the ZBrush Live YouTube channel. I'm assuming you're watching it right now on the YouTube channel, so you don't need that. And you also have my ArtStation and YouTube channel. You have some articles that I wrote for the rookies, and yeah, and all of that. My Instagram as well. So yeah, if you want to follow up on those, just copy that, and I'm just gonna put it up on the screen here. I think it's just easier. There you go. Well, scan that. I'm gonna move this out of the way for you guys to scan that. All right. Can you guys scan it? If you did it work? If it did, yeah. All right, guys. So thank you so much for being a part of this and keeping me company while I showcase a few ZBrush tips and tricks and how to start off your props, right? And again, as always, this is Rodolfo Silva with Maxon, and I'll see you in a little while. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.